You're listening to Transforming Employee Experience Management, a new way of doing business. The third episode in the How to Manage the Modern Workforce, Maximizing Employee Experiences and Productivity podcast series, produced by Aberdeen and brought to you by SAP. In our previous episode, we highlighted how trends such as remote work affect HR leaders' ability to manage workforce requirements. We learned that top-performing firms use AI capabilities widely and effectively to address the complexities involved with changing business conditions. This episode will dive deeper into how HR leaders are managing employee experiences. This discussion is hosted by Omer Minkara, VP and Principal Analyst at Aberdeen, with special guest Nicole Saunders, Director of Solution Marketing SAP SuccessFactors, and Matt Burgon, Global Solution Strategy at SAP Qualtrics. And now your host, Omer Minkara.
Great. Thank you, Jess, and hi, everyone. Once again, welcome to our conversation where we have a great topic that we'll be going through today with our co-speakers, Nicole and Matt from SAP. So first of all, Nicole and Matt, both of you, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Same here. We're glad that you guys can both join us today. So as I mentioned early on, we're going to talk about transforming employee experience management. What an important topic nowadays, but also what a heavily loaded topic, right? There's a lot of different pieces around employee experience. It has a lot of different touch points across different parts of the business. So we're going to talk about different topics or different subsections under employee experience as part of our conversation today. First, we're going to talk about the top factors that influence employee experiences. Is paying more to employees versus offering better benefits or time off the right way to go? So we'll touch on those kinds of things. Then we're going to talk about remote work. Right. So a lot of organizations have already transformed, if not, have been using that for a while. Some are trying to dip their toes. So we'll talk about some of the best practices in terms of how to get the most out of remote work. And then we're also going to talk about how to really excel in today's environment in such a way where companies are able to maximize employee engagement. So before we get started with all that, though, I do want to kick things off with a little bit of a higher level conversation as far as where HR leaders today are standing. Now, that's important because a lot of their challenges today, the priorities that they put in place in their businesses are impacting their activities to manage employee experiences. So recently, we've completed a survey analyzing responses from HR leaders within companies of all sizes, industries, and around the world. And it had different touch points. It was largely focused on employee experiences, but we collected data points around what keeps the HR leaders up at night. What are they focused on? And it seems that the employee motivation piece is really a critical area that companies are struggling with, especially with the uncertainty in the business. Companies are trying to get the employees motivated or keep the morals and motivation up because there's a lot of changes happening. Companies need to be adaptive. They need to be flexible. But for that to happen, for employees to be able to quickly adapt, they need to be motivated. They need to be provided with the right platforms. So, as we go through our research, we also realize that it's harder to do that in a remote work environment. You just don't have employees coming to the office or come as often as they did into the office. So the dynamics are a little bit different. Now, recently we completed the survey that I referenced early on. And one of the questions that we asked in that survey to our participants was, what are some of the factors that influence your employees' experiences? Right? Is it more influential, or is it better for you as a business to pay more for your employees versus giving them better benefits or establish a better work-life balance? Now, we asked that question as a multi-choice question because the reality is there's no one size fits all, or there's not one thing that works best for every single company out there. Surprisingly, and I'm saying surprisingly because initially we had different expectations. We thought that financial payments to salaries would be ranking as number one factor for employee experiences, and it was quite up top. It was number two, but number one was quite different. Now, number one factor for employee experiences was benefits. And that's why I said surprising because, obviously employees are working to make a living, but it seems that especially in today's environment where they may not have as much negotiating power as they did before, or, there's much more talent, employees really see value in the benefits as well. So those benefits come in different ways, but a lot of organizations really realize that they don't actually have to have a financial cost, so to speak, to create a better morale for employees, to motivate employees. So benefits is one way that companies are seeing that employee morale and motivation is influenced in a positive way, even more so than salaries. So we'll touch on that. Some of the other findings, however, included opportunities for advancement in the business. So not just being stagnant in employees' careers, but being provided with pathways to grow inside the business. And that's meaningful, right? It's not just employees wanting more ways to make a living, but also they want more meaning in the jobs that they do. So providing them with those meanings, that avenues for growth. And then time off policies, the work-life balance or work-life integration, increasingly with remote work, where employees are working, around different priorities. They have loved ones to take care of. They're homeschooling their kids. They may be managing health conditions for their loved ones. So there's a lot of different dynamics that they have to manage. And oh, by the way, they have to do their work. So work-life integration becomes an important topic along with time off policies. So really enabling employees to prioritize both the business demands, but the personal demands as well. So those are some really high level important topics, and there's a lot to unpack, which we'll do as we go through the conversation. But I'm curious to get both of you guys' take, Nicole and Matt. So maybe we start with you, Nicole. What are your observations out there working with different, HR leaders as it relates to what influences their employee experiences? We talked about benefits, salary, time off. What do you think benefits in particular was cited as more of an important factor than salary by our respondents?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. What we're seeing is there's a shift in how organizations are looking at and defining employee experience. Until recently, a lot of organizations looked at employee experience in a really traditional way, asking questions like, how are we doing? How are our leaders in the organization doing? So asking questions to employees to kind of gauge that experience through that lens, they're looking at things like, what's the level of trust in leadership, employee confidence in the company strategy, the extent to which an employee's work is aligned to the organizational objectives, right? And with this approach, when you think about the moments that matter in that employee experience and that employee journey, it tends to be a lot of HR type events and transactions. So things such as promotions, development opportunities, training, onboarding, performance reviews, things of that nature, right? But what's really missing in this traditional approach is the viewpoint of the employee. So we've seen organizations start to kind of change that lens through which they look at and define that employee experience and shift their questions to start asking the employee, how are you doing? To get to the root of what really matters to them. So when you take this approach, you start to see that employee experience, it's influenced by more than just HR events and transactions. So for example, you may find out that it's things like a flexible work schedule, for example, that really defines that experience for that employee, because it gives that working parent that's working remotely and juggling, having the kids at home if you have children, with managing work, it gives them that flexibility to take care of a sick child during the day and still be able to manage their workload. Or it could be something as simple as a virtual team happy hour, for example, to make your remote workers feel really connected and engaged with their colleagues and their teams. So as you mentioned, benefits is ranking higher than salary. So if you take into account that viewpoint of the employee, it would make sense that benefits are ranked higher than salary. Because as we've seen recently, salaries are normalizing, right? So employees are increasingly looking outside of salary at the entire rewards package. So when you think about that from the employee experience viewpoint, a salary conversation typically happens once a year. So whether you get paid weekly, biweekly, or monthly, you know how much you're going to get paid throughout that year, right? But benefits, on the other hand, are something that employees have interactions and experiences with throughout the year. So, for example, an employee who has a dental emergency will want to know if their insurance covers a root canal. Or if an employee is buying a house, they might go to their benefits to see what sorts of insurance discounts are available to them. Or if there is going to be a birth of a child, looking at benefits to see what that experience offers, right? So benefits cover the holistic health and well-being of employees in the workplace. And it's really these benefits that enable employees to bring them their best selves to work every day. So benefits is definitely front and center and very important when you think about the employee experience. Matt, I'm curious if what your thoughts are on this topic. It's definitely an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. It's a very, very interesting topic. And I think, if we look at it, the great thing is that organizations are really taking more time to look at the employee experience and the entire employee journey end to end. As you mentioned, and as opposed to just asking, how are we doing as an organization? Employers are now asking their employees, how are you doing as an employee, and how can we help you even in your life outside of work? Now, it's interesting. The results of the study really aren't surprising, and it's not new. If you look holistically at employee engagement results over the past couple of decades, this has been a common theme. Pay is not king. Now, if you look at historical results of engagement studies, the majority of employees are not happy with their pay, right? Nobody feels like they get paid enough. Everybody wants more money, and everyone says pay is a critical motivator for them. And this is partially true. If pay doesn't meet an individual's basic needs, if pay for individual roles are below market rates or even their peers, pay does become a critical issue that impacts engagement, retention, and performance. But for most organizations, pay is actually in line with market and peers and meets the basic needs of their employees. So while pay always ranks low in studies, it's absolutely not a key driver for engagement, retention, and performance. The leading factors change from year to year and from study to study. But in today's world, the most important thing that organizations have to understand is that you can't solve employee engagement issues just by throwing money at them. It really does require organizations to take a thoughtful, dedicated, employee-centric approach. Employers or organizations really need to understand what key driving factors are, such as the benefits offered or the perks or the culture, and drive those initiatives for employees, because those are the things that really move the needle much further, much faster, and much longer than just a direct increase to the employee wallet. So as we think about this, the question that employers have to ask is, truly, what benefits are truly important to my employees? In this study, benefits is a pretty broad field. Specifically, what are the things that are going to motivate, drive, and engage employees? And what do employers need to be aware of? And as you said, Omer, one size does not fit all. Just because an organization published a study about how they changed their employee offerings and it had incredible results doesn't mean that's going to work for all organizations. Different organizations, different industries, different geographies, different employee groups will value different things, whether it's healthcare, tuition reimbursement, time off, profit sharing, or paid volunteer days. And that's really the change in focus that we're seeing from HR and that we're hearing from HR leaders, is having that kind of holistic view on the employee experience and employee engagement. So, Omer, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt and Nicole. Those are some great observations that seem to line up really closely with some of our observations from our survey findings. So with that, we're going to transition to our remote work related analysis. As I mentioned early on, remote work is definitely going to be an area that a lot more organizations are going to be finding ways to adapt as it relates to not just their employee experience programs, but also how they operate as part of their activities. So as part of our survey that I referenced early on, where we studied responses from several hundred organizations around the globe and really tried to figure out what are their priorities, one of the questions that we asked was, what are the technologies that HR leaders are using today to cope with their business environment? So going back to the business environment, we talked about, lack of employee motivation. We talked about remote work. So all of that, and we heard about the different factors. So there were a number of technologies that HR leaders participating in our survey have told us that they are important for their roadmap to manage the change. Number one was payroll. Now, isn't that ironic, right? So early on, we said salary is the second top factor that influences employee experiences. And now here we are saying payroll is the number one technology that HR leaders are focusing on. By the way, before I go further down, benefits management happens to be the second top technology. But as you can see, they sort of flip-flopped a little bit. So what we're hearing from the employees is that they see greater value in benefits, more so than salary. And what we're hearing from HR leaders from a technology prioritization standpoint is they see payroll as the number one technology area that they're focusing on, with benefits following a close second. So what that means is two things. Number one, it doesn't mean that HR leaders are not hearing or addressing the employee needs. What that tells us is that the blocking and tackling mechanisms are very much a top priority. HR leaders don't want to be in a position where payments are falling behind or there are inaccuracies, especially in an environment where employees are not, coming into the office. They can't knock on the door of the HR person in the office or go to accounting. They don't have their managers inside an office. There's a lot of anxiety as it is for a lot of employees that they're dealing with. So HR leaders are trying to minimize any issues as it relates to payroll. So that's why we're seeing that as the number one area of focus. But like I said, benefits management is a close second after payroll, and that has to do everything with why employees are seeing benefits as more of an important priority as it relates to what influences their experiences. So again, both you, Matt, and Nicole, you had some great observations, and I want to start off with you now, Matt, to get your take to see what are your suggestions for HR leaders that struggle managing employee experiences in today's climate where people are working remotely. Like I said, employees are not able to knock on the door of an HR person inside the office. How do you see the savvy HR leaders respond and adapt to such changes in the market?
That's a really, really good question. And I'll just comment real quick on the results of this study. The fact that payroll fell first isn't hugely surprising, right? I've talked to a lot of HR leaders, and we always say, you know what, HR has a lot of room. We're okay to make mistakes, try new things, except when it comes to payroll. The one thing you can't ever mess up is payroll, because that creates so many downstream issues. So seeing the focus on payroll tech, it isn't a huge surprise. And I'm glad that they're doing it, because we have to get that right. Because as people are worrying about, hey, am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Am I going to be able to buy food for my family? That's critical. And, as I think about suggestions for HR leaders coming into the workplace, it's not uncommon for employees and organizations to make some incorrect assumptions about what critical priorities are for employees. And it's even more compounded due to our unprecedented working situations brought on by the global pandemic. So I'll just provide two quick suggestions. My number one suggestion for HR leaders is to stay connected to your employees and your organizations. You have to be listening and getting feedback from your employees now more than ever. I've actually heard HR leaders say things like, oh, you know what, employees are already dealing with so much. They're working from home, trying to manage childcare, dealing with sick family members. I just don't want to bother them with surveys or meetings or focus groups just so I can get more information and find out what's going on. And that's exactly the opposite of where HR leaders need to be. They need to be closer to employees now more than ever. But they also need to understand employee needs have changed. And what employees are focused on, what's important then to them now, is changing from week to week. And it's important that organizations are setting up environments to help them be successful, even when dealing with some of these outside impacts that we're not used to. This is not a time for HR leaders to be guessing what employees need and care about. They need to be collecting data and driving the business forward based on the results of that data. The problem when HR leaders make guesses about what employees really care about and what's most critical, they end up wasting time and money trying to fix an issue that may not even exist. For example, there was an organization that contacted Qualtrics to try and help them understand and address an issue that they had with the retention of their employees. Prior to coming to Qualtrics, they'd actually tried to solve the issue without data to back it up. Based on kind of water cooler conversations, what they were hearing around the office is that the pay wasn't good enough. So immediately they made increases to pay that cost this organization millions of dollars and sat and waited. The problem is nothing changed and the attrition rates remained steady. They then came to Qualtrics and said, look, what we did didn't work. Help us figure out what's broken, what's going on. So we did a complete full engagement study of the relationship between the organization and their employees. The insight revealed that there were issues with the brand and the culture and the support of the employees in the organization. These were the key drivers that were impacting employee engagement and the intention to stay with the organization. Now the organization had the information necessary to make the right changes and drive the action that they needed. So employers and organizations need to be listening to employees and really understand. You can't just guess what's going on. My second suggestion to HR leaders is to develop a deep relationship with your CIO and your other C-suite leaders. We have to figure out how the CHRO and the CIO particularly work together and how they work together to impact the employee experience. And here's why. Historically, employee engagement fell 100% to the HR line of business and the CHRO. Technology leaders were responsible for just making sure the technology was up and running and accessible and you didn't have any data breaches. That is really no longer the case. CIOs are now equally responsible for employee experience, and there's a good reason. CIOs and technology leaders control the tools that employees are using every single day. And if those tools and technologies don't deliver a modern consumer experience like what we use on a daily basis, it impacts employee engagement. It drives things like retention, satisfaction, productivity. And of course, in our current environment, that impact has just been magnified due to the pandemic. We are on technology all the time. We're trying to do the things that we used to do in the office completely remote. So technology now becomes a critical factor of employee engagement. Look, the reality is we've all had jobs where we log into our work solution and it feels like we took a 10-year step backwards in technology. And in today's environment, that just doesn't cut it anymore. Technology is more important than ever. In fact, in a recent study, 93% of employees, the vast majority, believe that a modern, up-to-date tech experience is one of the most important aspects of their workplace. And there was a large portion of those employees that would actually leave their organization just for a better technology experience, not for more pay, not for better benefits, not for anything else, just because the tech I use at this other company is going to be better. We recently, Qualtrics actually recently released a study about workers during the current crisis that we're facing right now. And one of the key insights was that workers that don't have access to the resources they need during the pandemic are twice as likely to quit once this crisis passes. So organizations that aren't doing kind of a holistic understanding and consistently listening to their employees and giving employees an opportunity to share how they're feeling and what they're dealing with are actually developing a really, really significant risk of losing those employees when things calm down a little bit. Long story short, when we think about what drives employee experience, we need to think big. We've got to think bigger than we normally do. Think about the day-to-day of the employee experience, technology, facilities, commutes, peers, managers, everything. You get the idea. We just have to think much broader than we have in the past.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just one thing to add on that specific to benefits is I think that there is a unique opportunity right now in managing that remote workforce to market benefits to employees in new and creative ways utilizing the benefits technology. So if we think about it, it could be things like sending a text message to an employee with a child dependent turning 16. You could send out information about adding them to auto insurance coverage, for example, or it could be sending a notification to an employee who just got married with a congratulatory note along with some advice, such as, suggesting that they check to see who has better medical coverage and include some reminders on certain things they should do, such as update their beneficiaries and so on. So managing employee experience while figuring out how to shift processes and programs and infrastructure to support a remote workforce is challenging, most definitely, but it also presents lots of new opportunities to engage employees in different ways. And I think that there's a big opportunity with looking at benefits kind of beyond the traditional experience of using a benefits portal and open enrollment, looking at benefits kind of throughout the year and looking at new ways that you can use AI and alerts and notifications and text messages to engage and connect with that remote workforce.
Great. Thank you both, Nicole and Matt. And, you guys have both some great observations as far as, number one, not seeing benefits overall or, broader employee experience as something that you have to do just from an operational blocking tackling perspective. There's a lot of future value add. And Matt, one thing that you highlighted, it made me remember one of the data points that we captured a few months ago, actually. So a separate survey other than the one that I mentioned around employee productivity this time. And one of the questions we asked in that survey was, what are the top factors that influences an employee's productivity levels? And it's not going to sound surprising, but I think it just helps connect the dots. That is, employees say that it is the technology tools more than anything that influences their success in workplace. So setting the right expectations, the right KPIs, but are employees provided with the right tools so that they can succeed in their jobs? So from an employee experience standpoint, if you enable employees with the right tools, then not only you're helping them succeed in their roles, but now they're a lot more motivated wherever they're working, if they're working remotely or in person. So, I think that's just an important reminder there. So as we talk about benefits management, as we talk about the broader picture of employee experience, one of the other questions that we asked our participants specific to benefits management, because it's, it came out as our number one factor influencing employee experiences, was what are the challenges in that area? So what are the HR leaders telling us that they're seeing as roadblocks that they're trying to overcome in their benefit management programs? So number one, by far, compared to the following responses, was the cost of it, the cost of benefits administration. So I guess the take here is that, when you're implementing benefits management, there's the cost and benefit analysis that needs to go hand in hand with it. So, investing in the right areas is critical because you may have good intentions to help employees become more motivated, but you may be investing in the wrong areas, so you're not seeing the desired returns. So one of the areas that I highly suggest that our research has proven time and time again is doing employee surveys, getting an employee pulse, and finding out what are the benefits that they value most, because they change over time, right? Pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, the benefits that employees may have said back then probably look a whole lot different than what they say now, and it's probably going to look different in another 6 months or 12 months. So that's one thing to consider. Another one is increased complexity of benefits administration, not just the cost, but also the complexity, which is one of the reasons why the cost is there. So with those being some of the challenges, Nicole, I do want to get back to you here, and Matt, I'm also interested to get your take as well. What do you guys suggest HR leaders to do to manage the cost and benefit equilibrium of benefits? So they minimize the cost, but they also get the most benefits out of their benefits management programs.
Yeah, so it all has to do with benefits data, right? Organizations have access to a lot of benefits data, but it's getting the insights into that data to drive informed decisions and actions that I think is the challenge that a lot of organizations struggle with today. Organizations need to take control. It's critical that they own their own data. I mean, it's common to see organizations looking to benefits brokers for insights into what they should do with regards to their benefits offerings. Organizations can use that data to understand where the spend is happening with regards to benefits. How is the program being utilized? Where's the cost coming from? Identifying any at-risk populations. It's just endless, the insights that you can get from this data. So being able to measure the success and ROI of benefits programs by looking at health insights and analytics gives organizations the information they need on utilization to control costs and optimize benefit spend in areas that truly matter to employees. Matt, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, thanks. Nicole, you're exactly right on what you said, right? We have to have the data, and it's not just external market data or what other organizations are doing in terms of benefits and perks, but it's really understanding from your employees what they're interested in, what they want, what is going to drive their engagement and their focus and performance in the organization, and what they're willing to give up, what maybe we're offering them and paying for that they don't really care about, that doesn't provide any utility to them. For example, Qualtrics has a solution that we call our Employee Benefits Optimizer. And this is much more than just a simple survey that asks employees, hey, what do you want? Because we all want everything, especially if it's free, right? We want the best of everything. We want everything we can get for free. The difference is Qualtrics Benefits Optimizer is actually a conjoint study. So it forces employees to make trade-off decisions. Would you rather have a better healthcare plan or a richer 401k, higher 401k or free food? By forcing employees to make these types of selections, employers can truly understand what people value most and then have the ability to overlay that with costs, giving organizations the ability to figure out what the best return on investment is for their benefit strategy. We had a large financial client that actually selected Qualtrics to design and deliver one of these conjoint benefits study. And it was significant and a huge success for a couple of reasons. First, for the first time ever, this organization was actually going directly to their employees and asking their views on potential benefits offerings, saying, hey, what do you want? We want to know how we can best help and serve you. Think of the impact of HR leaders in the organization coming to employees and saying, hey, we care about you and we want to know what you need. So we design aligned with what your wants and needs are. Second, not only did they have the insight into what employees cared about most, but they understood the value, relative value compared against other benefits. What were employees willing to give up? The reality is we have limited amounts of resources to devote to employee benefits, right? But if are employees willing to give up some of their 401k funding so they can have richer PTO? Companies have limited resources, and sometimes we guess what employees want. And sometimes those guesses mean we're just throwing money away. The institution now knows exactly where to invest. They know what bets are going to pay off in terms of employee benefits. And the best part about this is that through technology, organizations no longer have to deal with the painful lift of getting the information out of these types of studies. It doesn't take months and months and years sometimes, and outside consulting expertise and huge data scientists to come in and hundreds of thousands of dollars to run this type of study. One of the key reasons we see clients adopting this type of technology is because it's simple and it's inexpensive. With just a few clicks, organizations can kick off a study in just days and weeks and quickly, affordably, and confidently identify the optimal benefits package for your organization. The tool even allows you to simulate different benefits packages together so you can optimize your budget and needs for your organization. And because of the simplicity, you can create a program that instead of just listening once every 2 years or once every year even, you're consistently receiving feedback for your employees. And you can make changes in real time that really help define you as a leading edge, world-class organization. So that's what we're seeing, and that's what the data is driving organizations to run. So Omar, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt and Nicole, again. Great observations, and I like the agility piece that you also referred to, Matt. So it's not a one and done exercise, right? So the benefits that may have been valued last year may not be as important now. So really that agility piece, flexibility goes a long way. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Nicole. I think it was very insightful for our listeners as well to really hear what's going on, with their peers. What are their priorities? What's working and what's not? So with that, we'll hand it off to our producer. But again, I do want to thank you guys both for joining the conversation today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in to our next episode for a deep dive into remote learning in 2021 and beyond.